Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to How to Drum and Bass. As you know, it's my mission to teach you awesome things about drum and bass. And today, we're gonna do that a little bit differently than in most of my videos, because in most of my videos, we break down what other big top performers are doing right now. But today, I just wanna share with you a really cool technique for bass plucks. Now, the reason for this is that bass plucks are super prevalent in drum bass music. You definitely hear them out loud a lot in the dance floor drum and bass genres, where it's just forming sort of the bed, solid guitar-like bed that the usually kind of big dance floor leads sit on. You know, that dang 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 dang. But even in other songs where they're not so prevalent, there is a lot of usage of these dark, bassy plucks that sound like a sort of synthesized but heavier and really fat version of an actual bass guitar. And so in a couple other videos on this channel, we have taken a dive in some plucks like, for example, Dimension. But in my personal experience, I feel like really good bass plucks, no matter the genre, are a little bit of an unsolved problem for many people because they usually end up sounding a bit thin and you'll have to layer it with some other basses. And today, I want to dive into a way of processing your plucks that can both make it like super fat on its own, but also give you some super interesting and really gnarly textures and timbres to it. And we're gonna do that using, amongst other things, the vocoder. So let's start out with just, what you would normally do. So I have basically what is like a basic pluck here. There's really nothing special to it. I've got a couple of notes playing here that are D, F, D, and D, basically. And the only things that I've really got on here is a compressor to sort of beef it up and an amp, right? And the patch looks mega simple. This is essentially how anyone would basically create a simple bass pluck. Just two saw waves that are being plucked, some filter drive, but just with like a short volume envelope, and then some processing on it, but nothing super special. And this will end up sounding something like this. Or, if you wanted to like go ahead and add some unison to it, and put that detune down a little bit, that's what a lot of people do as well. And this sounds all right. I mean, this is cool. You could definitely use this. And for sure, in a mix, it'll probably sound fine, but you have to layer it with a bunch of other sounds to not make it sound so thin. I feel like a lot of these really do sound kind of thin. And so today we're gonna look at something else, at how we can use a vocoder to basically beef that up. And the end result, I've got two versions here, but obviously the options here are kind of unlimited. But one of the end results sound like this. So that's really like almost that, Muzz style, super dark bass pluck. And then another one, which is super beefy, sounds like this. Now, I really love this. It's so powerful, yet it's really crunchy, and it just has a lot of harmonics while still being a singular sound, essentially. Hey, what's up, guys? Just want to take 1 minute of your time to ask you if you are looking to start learning about drum bass production, or maybe you've already started and you just feel like you need a lot more of the fundamentals and you want to understand it really much more thoroughly and start to finish. We have just done a soft launch for our newest product. It's a membership called the School of Drum and Bass, and it has more than 200 videos that go from all the way in the beginning on how to produce music and how to use Ableton and all those kinds of things, all the way to producing a professional drum and bass track, mixing, and pretty much everything that needs to be covered for a beginner and an intermediate producer. If you feel like that might be interesting for you, there's a super special offer right now. You can get your first week for just £1 That is like $1.50 if you live in the US, or like €1.15. So if you're ready to level up your drum bass production, go check it out in the link below. All right, let's move on with the video. All right, so let's take this basic pluck that we just created. And actually, pretty much already, what I kind of want to do is I want to pick another preset. So I have a couple of presets from the How to Drum and Bass Essentials preset pack. One of them is like, just a little bit more crunchy. I'll run you through really quickly what that looks like. But I want something with a little bit more top end. This one's called Bass Pluck Crunchy because it has exactly that. And it sounds like this. Currently, it doesn't sound that amazing, which is fine. That's also because it gets a lot of this crunch from this icon has kick, and in this preset you can sort of manage that as well to make it a little bit beefier. But we're going to stick with it the way that it is right now. Just to make everything simple, let me just delete all this processing that we got here so that we only have this compressor to beef it up a little bit in terms of volume. Right? Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to add a vocoder onto this. And we're going to put the carrier here. It'll say noise, but you want to put it on external. And then what I've got is something really simple. So we're going to be playing these notes. And whatever notes you're playing, you want to put them in a separate layer. And I've called it the voc layer, as in vocoder layer. It has to play the same notes. And all we're going to do here is we're going to throw a serum patch on there with a saw wave. And the saw wave needs nothing else but maybe a LFO to control the volume. You can see here that I have an empty oscillator. You can ignore that. But basically, this by itself is a low oscillating saw wave, right? You could actually pick to put it one higher, but yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. And so what we're going to do is that is going to be used as the input for this vocoder. Now, it's a little bit hard to explain super shortly what a vocoder does, but it's almost like a spectral masking device. What that means is it's going to run whatever's coming out of, well, everything before the chain here through the frequency content of this saw. And the cool thing about that is because this saw is so frequency content rich, it's going to allow for some really interesting, I think you can call it filtering, but what I like to think about is merging of two sounds. That's how it feels to me. And so yeah, we're gonna select external here, and then we're gonna put the input on this channel that we just made, which is called Voc layer. And then we have all of these to play with. There's some stuff down here as well, which you can kind of mess around with, but the most important controls are going to be here. So let's go back to this one. And mind you, this Voc layer doesn't actually have to play. It only really serves as sort of an input kind of channel. So you can actually turn this off, and you probably want to, unless you actually also want that saw sound to come with it, but you probably don't. You can immediately hear that it sounds a lot fatter, and it sounds a lot more sort of richer on those darker harmonics. This is already super cool, right? I think. But then we can go ahead and play around with these depth buttons, for example. The depth button is essentially almost like the dry wet button, except it's about how much of the filtering happens, which is how much of the total effect to let through. So we can see that the more depth we do, the kind of, in this case, the more powerful it becomes. Now, we do want to keep this attack on 1 millisecond, or at least, well, whatever is the lowest, because we want it to hit immediately, especially because we got a pluck. We do not want it to kick in later. Want to keep it crunchy. But we can't play with this release button. Probably something fast though. The most interesting one though, however, is this Foreman button. So with this, we can make it even darker or a little bit brighter. And you can hear, sort of like in that first quarter down, that seems to be a really sweet spot for this sort of really beefy, plucky sound. And so then we have this dry wet button, right? And I would say that probably what you want to do is you want to put it up pretty high, maybe 100% or maybe just a little bit below that, because it's quite literally a fade button between the original signal and the vocoded end product, except it doesn't seem as strong. Like, for example, here at 75%, it sounds like way more of the original signals coming through. And I found that at 100%, often it sounds the most sort of gnarly and disgusting, especially when you're using a saw wave as the carrier. There is a small problem though with this, which is like basically any sort of, stereo field stuff that we've kind of created here. I'm not exactly sure if this is completely the case, but it just ends up, losing a bunch of its width, and it's a pretty sort of singular mono sounding sound. So what we can do then is we can go ahead and add like a Serum effects on top of this to sort of bring some of that back. And additionally, what this will also allow us to do is to maybe introduce like some creative filtering, such as something like combs or something in that matter. So let's see what we can do here. So first of all, I want to turn on the noise here, because the noise is going to act as the audio in, the level all the way up, and we're going to press this note latch so that whatever's happening here in this filter right here is also going to be activated whenever a note hits. Right. I don't want this filter though. I want to see what happens when I get one of these combs or reverb filter, but let's turn this off for a second. Let's actually first add some hyper back in there. And we definitely want to put that retrig button on. This is optional, by the way. You don't really need this, but it does, make it a little bit cooler. And then we can also go back into this filter here and actually add a comb filter. The nice thing about the combs filter is that it actually has the additional effect of sort of driving a little bit of those lower frequencies. So we can sort of see where does that sound good. And we can get a lot of the crunch in there as well now. So we keep that beefy low end that was created by the vocoder and that thickness, but we do get some crunch back that you would normally associate with, a really nice actual bassy or guitar-y pluck. Now you're hearing it's kind of doing some weird stuff there, so maybe we want to drive this mix down a little bit. But I think this is pretty cool. Additionally, what we could also do is, for example, try to add an amp either before or after this vocoder. So we could, for example, give it a bass amp, and funnily enough, we might want to actually turn this bass button down because it will probably get a bit intense. But you can see that it's really pushing it now. And then, we could actually add an amp after the vocoder as well, but then, maybe actually not a bass amp, but maybe a clean amp to get some more of that crunch out of there as well again. I do think that filters out also a little bit of the basses, which is good because the bass is super, super intense right now. Boost works as well. Basically, all you're trying to do here is sort of, balance out that super beefy sound that we had into something a little bit more usable. We can go back into that Serum effects as well and maybe even add some, chorus to it or some other effect. Sounds pretty good to me. And then we can see if there's any sort of frequency content that we might want to accentuate with an EQ after that. Another cool thing that we could kind of do, since we want sort of that crunchiness in there as well, is we could actually go ahead and add a formant filter. Now, not all formant properties will work here. But for example, something like that does seem to sort of bring it out a little bit more in that top end. Sick. And then lastly, you could go back into the Serum effects and sort of really change the sound by adding, either changing this filter that we already have or adding some more filtering. So yeah, that is a new technique to go about making super beefy bass plucks. So if you want to get this rack or any of these other racks that resulted in these end results, you can go and download them in the link below for free, but I definitely recommend you to go ahead and play with this yourself. Maybe even add a second vocoder at a lower dry wet to maybe add some extra formant stuff in there, but just, like at a lower mix. Honestly, guys, you can do whatever you like and make some really sick shit. Anyway, that was the video. Thank you so much for watching. If you felt like this was helpful, then you may want to check out the Drum and Bass Sound Design Mastery course. As I mentioned earlier in this video, we go over these kinds of techniques and so much more in that if you like this, I'm 100% sure you will learn a ton from that and enjoy yourself. All right, guys, without further ado, I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I'll see you in the next one.